What's going on, family? I'm Scrapbook Boxing, Museum of the Forgotten Fisticuffs series. I'm the creator of 100 Years of World Championship Fights. Hopefully you had an opportunity to revisit that series. Took over 269 videos to complete. And it was encouraged by a conversation that I had with an old historian friend of mine who was 94 years of age at the time of that conversation. The conversation lasted over 4 hours with information that you couldn't possibly read in a book anywhere. I knew this man over 34 years of my life. Since he was a little boy, he has witnessed the majority of the fights that took place during the 1920s. He bared witness to the Georgia Deacon, Tiger Flowers, being denied usage of a heavy bag when he was preparing for a fight with Sam Langford in 1922. You see, Jack Dempsey happened to be at the gym that day, and he wanted to borrow the bag for a photo op. So when Tiger Flowers was in the process of hitting the heavy bag, Jack Dempsey took over the heavy bag without communication to Theodore Tiger Flowers. And that's just the way it was during those years. I learned of another story where Panama Joe Gans and Kid Norfolk, who was known as William Ward, was set to spar with Bill Brennan, who was preparing with a fight with Jack Dempsey, 1920. The fight would take place in New York's Madison Square Garden, but the training session was very interesting. You see, Leo P. Flynn, who was the manager of both Kid Norfolk and Panama Joe Gans, has set up a sparring session. And he specifically told Panama Joe Gans just to move around with Bill Brennan. Panama Joe Gans could not resist because he found it so easy to hit and not be hit by Bill Brennan. When Kid Norfolk got in the ring after Panama Joe Gans, basically beat Bill Brennan half to death. And the word would get back to Jack Dempsey. The black fighters would never get a shot at Jack Dempsey's world title. 1924, Harry Wills was promised an opportunity. In fact, there was a signed, agreed contract with Jack Dempsey. And since Jack Dempsey did not honor the contract, he was banned from New York and couldn't fight in any of the arenas anymore. Harry Wills was agreed to another opportunity with Jack Dempsey in 1926. And he would lose that opportunity as well. You see, he fulfilled all the requirements of Jack Dempsey. Had to take on Louis Angel Firpo. And he did so. But he would lose on a foul when he faced Jack Sharkey, the Boston Gob. For that reason, he would lose his colored heavyweight championship belt. Had nothing to do with the fight with Jack Sharkey. Jack Dempsey would come along and take on Gene Tunney and lose his title in Philadelphia. He would have a return go, 1927, famous long count. Be Soldiers Field in Chicago. The first fight was a rainy night. The second fight was a famous long count. But getting back to this conversation, that's what inspired me to do that series that consisted of 269 videos. But I would have this conversation with my brother Kurtis Anderson. And I told him that I wanted to talk about this further. He felt that I should discuss this with the world. And he encouraged me to do videos on those conversations. The videos lasted from 1681 to 1987. 269 videos later. He asked me what was I going to name it. At that time, I didn't have an idea of what I was going to name the videos when I spoke with Kurtis. So he suggested that I name it 100 Years of Great Fights. Because I told him I wanted to go back at least 100 years. But I decided to put a spin on it, and I named it 100 Years of World Championship Fights. Now, during the course of revisiting some of those videos, it didn't dawn on me on how taken advantage of black fighters were. I always knew that. But I went into more detail as to what really took place during those years. And it drew tears from my eyes. So much so that I had to do videos on black fighters. I wanted to tell the story as it should be told. Once again, I picked up the phone and got a hold of my brother Kurtis Anderson. And he could be more happier to be involved in this project. So I told him I want to name it 100 Years of 150 World Championship Fights. He was all aboard. Kurtis and I picked out the names that we felt would be suitable. 150 greatest black fighters. And I think we did a pretty good job. I want to thank my brother Kurtis Anderson for his time and his input. But these stories must be told. What you're looking at here is a famous illustration of the Battle Royale. It took place from the 1600s as late as 1920s. Now you would have the drunken white plantation owners would gather 8 to 10 boys from the age of 12 to the age of 30. And they would blindfold the boys, and in this case, young men. And they would pour chili pepper powder on the inside of the blinds, because they knew that the young men would open their eyes at some point, and the second form of entertainment would begin. Because these young boys would jump around like human jackrabbits in pain and agony of the pepper burning their eyes. This was entertainment for the white plantation owners. They'd be spun around 20 times, shoved into the middle of the ring. And sometimes a back room. And of course, the first thing they would bang into, they would swing away. Until the last man was standing. And as they took off their blindfolds, they would jump around like human jackrabbits. This was funny to the white plantation owners. And some of the men that would be involved in this mockery of event would be some of the champions that you would know. Fighters such as Bojack, William Ward, who was Kid Norfolk, Elmer Violent Ray, have over 60 of these competitions. George Dixon, who was the first black champion in his sport. In fact, George Dixon would be involved in 2 of the death match, fight to the death, where after completing a battle royale, the last 2 men standing, which he was always one of the 2. However they decide who would get the hand wraps, they would put hand wraps and soak them in bronze and a form of glue and oil. And they would place glass and strip metal. 1 arm only. Only one of those men would get 1 arm casted in glass and strip metal and would fight to the death. Because the other arms would be tied to the opponent. In other words, left arm, right arm. And it would swing away till 1 man died. George Dixon would be involved in 2 of those matches. Most don't even know that existed. Yet Sam Langford, his name was Samuel Edgar Langford, was known as the Boston Tar Baby, the Black Tar Boy, Boston Bone Crusher, Black Tarzan, Boston Terror. He was born March 4th, 1886 in Mayerworth Falls, Nova Scotia. He died January 12th, 1956 in Cambridge, Massachusetts. He would win the Boston Featherweight Amateur Championship, the Mexican Heavyweight Championship, the European and Colored Middleweight Championship, the Australian Heavyweight Championship that he would win from Sam McVeigh, 5-time Colored World Heavyweight Champion. He was a 1-time Black Heavyweight Champion. When he would defeat Klondike Haynes, would be for the claimant of the Colored Heavyweight Championship belt. You see, there was a time when you had the Negro Championship belt, the Colored and the Black Championship titles. Let's make sure we understand that. Sam Langford was the only fighter to fight the first Black lightweight champion in Joe Gans, first Black welterweight champion in Joe Walcott, the first Black heavyweight champion in Jack Johnson, the first Black middleweight champion in Tiger Flowers, the second Black welterweight champion in Dixie Kid. He would face the colored champions such as Lee Anderson and Jack Johnson. Sam McVeigh fought Sam McVeigh 15 times, 2 losses, 4 draws, 5 no decisions. Being in the ring with Joe Jeanette 14 times, 4 wins, 3 losses, 2 draws, and 5 no decisions. Harry Wills 23 times, 2 wins, 6 losses, and 15 no decisions. Al Gaynor, Jamaica Kid, George Godfrey, and Kid Norford. Fought Big Bill Tate and Lee Anderson. Jeff Clark, the Joplin Ghost. Jack Blackburn 6 times. John Lester Johnson, who cracked the ribs of Jack Dempsey. Larry Temple, who was the creator of the Bolo Punch. George Gunther. Ed Gunboat Smith. Fireman Jim Flynn, who he knocked out for 7 minutes straight. Didn't know if he was dead or alive. Philadelphia Jack O'Brien, 1911. It was a time when Jack O'Brien was the light heavyweight champion of the world. Sam Langford called out Jack Root, Mike Twin Sullivan, and Jack Twin Sullivan. Wanted to fight them both in the same day. Marvin Hart and Jim Jeffries. Jack Dempsey and Sailor Man Tom Sharkey. Gene Tunney, Jack Johnson, Jack Dempsey. He had 63 colored championship fights. Fought the men that was equivalent to today's fighters such as Shane Mosley and Vernon Forrest, Sean Porter and Rocky Lockridge, Tommy Morrison, Oliver McCall, and Julian Jackson, and Ricky Hatton. Johnny, unbelievable. Johnny Bump Footy Bumpus. Mike Tyson, Junior Jones, Kevin Kelly, and Adrian Broner, all in 1 month. And he was denied a world title shot from every last one of those men that I just mentioned. Sam Langford had over 500 fights. There's only 300 fights on record. That is a travesty. He fought in knee-deep water with water moccasins. Saw a man hanging as he was in the back of a broken wagon with a bailout bag over his head. Didn't know who he was going to fight. He would travel 15 miles in the back of a wagon that way. You ever been on a hay wagon? All the bumps, no shocks. He would travel in that condition for 15 miles. Joe Gans would face Sam Langford one day after facing a young man by the name of Dave Holly in Philadelphia. 300 miles he would travel to Boston. And his lightweight championship title was not on the line. It's the conditions black fighters were under. You look at Tom Molyneux, Bill Richmond, between 1804 and 1810, both men would take on Tom Cribb. When Bill Richmond fought him, some thought he won, some thought he lost. Tom Molyneux fought him. He knocked out Tom Cribb. Bill Richmond was the only man to protect Tom Molyneux that evening. Only man in his corner. He thought because of his name and reputation, he would get a fair opportunity. That proved not to be the case. You had over 10 to 15 men in the corner of Tom Cribb. This was for a championship fight. And after Tom Cribb was knocked down, most of those men in that ring jumped in and knocked down Tom Molyneux. They claimed that he had a fist full of pellets and they wanted justice. And it turned out that Tom Molyneux had no pellets, but his 5 metacarpals. And by jumping in the ring, they stepped on his hand and he fractured his hand. Now, Tom Molyneux, to step back for one moment, was given his freedom papers. He went to New York. He would fight in the bars in New York after drinking for a bit. Take out every man that he faced. He was a no-nonsense young man. And he was told, why don't you fight Tom Cribb? Went down the block staggering, came back to the bar and wanted to know where was Tom Cribb. They told him he had to travel to England. Some way, somehow, he made it there. After several bars, he would have fights with everyone in the bar, always come out on top because he was an MMA type of fighter. Get you in a full Nelson, an armbar, smash with a DDT. Bill Richmond happened to be in one of those bars to witness the event, and he told Tom Cribb that he felt that he should face, Tom Molyneux, and he felt as though he should face Tom Cribb. And Tom Molyneux said that I came here to face Tom Cribb. Where is he? He said, I can set this up, but you're going to have to fight a different way. So he would teach him how to box to some extent. And that fight, 1910, was a complete robbery and travesty against Tom Molyneux. And how you know he would be robbed? Because the cup was already made up. And it would say, world champion, Tom Cribb, loser, Tom Molyneux. Kurtis and I talked about Joe Gans, known as the Old Master. Born November 25th, 1874, Baltimore, Maryland. He would die August 10th, 1910 in Baltimore, Maryland. He would suffer from tuberculosis. He stood 5'7", weighed 133 to 139 pounds. He had a 71-inch reach. Had a record of 197 fights. 157 wins, 12 losses, 100 knockouts, and 22 draws. Joe Gans had more fights than what's on record. Fought the first African-American fight in America. Fought the longest rounds of championship history. 45 or 42 rounds. First black fighter to regain his championship of America. Began fighting in battle royales blindfolded. Joe Gans discovered the jab and the 1-2. He defeated Frank Earn to become the first lightweight champion of all times. As a black fighter. Gans takes his dives against Terry McGovern and battling Nelson. He went down 8 times before being stopped. And that drew suspicion. He would face battling Nelson between 1904 and 1909. What Joe Gans had to go through is a travesty. He would face Dave Holly, December 7th, 1903. The following day, he would travel 300 miles to take on Boston's Sam Langford. 15 rounds. Kurt and I talked about the Barbados Demon, Joe Walcott. Born March 13th, 1873 in Guyana. He died October 1st, 1935 in Ohio. He stood 5'1". He weighed 145 pounds. You see, we said December 6th, 1898. Walcott lost his first title shot against mysterious Billy Smith. Many thought that was a robbery. February 23rd, 1900, he defeated Joe Chowinski, Jewish light heavyweight, 7-round knockout. 1 year later, Joe Chowinski would knock out Jack Johnson in 3 rounds. The Barbados Demon had 16 fights that year. December 18th, 1901, he won a welterweight title, Buffalo, New York. James Firms, 5th round. September 30th, 1904, Joe Gans, non-title bout. Sam Langford, young Peter Jackson. Incredible. See, Curtis and I talked about Sam McVeigh. He was born May 17th, 1884. He died December 23rd, 1921. He was 5'10", weighed 210 to 230 pounds. He was in the ring with Harry Wills, December 20th, 1914. Between September 8th, 1920. Fought him 5 times. 1 win, 2 losses, 1 no decision. 1 no contest. He fight Joe Jeanette, 5'10", 204 pounds. April 15th, April 27th of 2015. Fought him 5 times. In 1 year. Jeff Clark, October 15th, 1915. August 2nd, 1921. 6 times. Joe Jeanette, Dixie Kid, and Harry Wills. Sam Langford, 1911, April 1st, August 14th, 1920. He faced Sam McVeigh 14 times. Battling Jim Johnson, April 7th, 1910. October 14th, 1917. 7 times. Harry Wills and Black Bill. Sam McVeigh was busy. Being in the ring with Frank Craig, the Harlem Coffee Cougar. June 3rd, 1907. Scored a 3rd round knockout, Paris, France. Being in the ring with Jack Johnson, February 26, 1903 to April 22nd, 1904. 3 times. He would go 20 rounds. He would unfortunately lose those fights with Jack Johnson. Twice in Los Angeles and once in San Francisco, California. We talked about Kid Northwood, who was William Ward, 5 foot 10 inches. He was a colored light heavyweight champion. He was born July 10th, 1893 in Belmont, Virginia. He died April 15th, 1968. Being in the ring with Big Bill Tate, December 14th, 1920. And Leo P. Flynn. Jeff Clark, May 16th, 1915. For a title shot. Lee Anderson, May 30th, 1921. The colored light heavyweight championship belt. Fight took place in Phoenix, Arizona. He's in the ring with Jamaica Kid, December 20th, 1921, New York's Madison Square Garden. And Tiger Flowers, the Georgia Deacon, July 4th, 1922, Memphis, Tennessee. He would fight Tiger Flowers once again, May 8th, 1923, in Springfield, Ohio. It was for the colored light heavyweight championship belt. He would also fight Billy Misk, Harry Greb, Jack Blackburn, battling Bill Tate, Jeff Clark and Lee Anderson, Tiger Flowers, Jamaica Kid, John Lester Johnson, Clay Turner, and Tut Jackson. What a fighter Sam McVay was. He must be on this list. We talked about Larry Temple, who was known as the Quaker City Terror, born 1882. Died November 17, 1942 in Hempstead, Long Island. He weighed 145 to 165 pounds, and he was managed by Joe Macias. He fought welterweights, middleweights, and light heavyweights. He was in the ring with Philadelphia Jack O'Brien and Sam Langford, Joe Walcott and Jack Blackburn, Dixie Kidd and George Gunther, young Peter Jackson and Jeff Clark, Jack Johnson, as well as the Jamaica Kid. I want to tell you a story about a young man who was a black fighter, fought out of the United Kingdom. His name was Len Johnson. Called him the English Flash. Born October 22nd, 1902 in Manchester, UK. He was 71 years of age at the time of his death. He would die September 28th, 1974 in Manchester, United Kingdom. He was a middleweight that stood 6 foot 1 inch and had a 74.5-inch reach. He was managed by John Bull. But he fought from 1920 to 1933, had total bouts of 135 fights. 95 wins, 36 knockouts, 33 losses, and 7 draws. There's short 50 fights on his record. And that is a travesty. He beat in the ring with Tiger Jack Payne, Saturday, April 17, 1920. They fought at the Alamodrome Theater. It was an opening show against Young Marshall, 10 rounds, and it would lose a decision, very controversial. But on the night of Tuesday, October 26, 1920, we scored a 10-round knockout over the same man, Marshall Hall, at the Free Trade Hall, Manchester, England. Between January 1st, 1921 and February 21st, 1921, Johnson went on a 2-fight winning streak. He would knock out Jerry Hogan in 3 rounds and Harry Johnson in 2 rounds. Johnson would then lose Tuesday, June 14, 1921, against Jack Royal in St. George Hall at the Oldham, United Kingdom. 10-round decision, welterweight contest. You see, Len Johnson was supposed to face Mickey Walker. Mickey Walker had in his contract he would never defend his championship belt against a black fighter. And Mickey Walker stated the only way he would fight him would be in the United Kingdom. So he signed for the contract, knowing that Len Johnson would fall under the Rule 25. That meant if you didn't have a black mother, if you didn't have a white mother or a white father, if you had 1 drop of black blood in your system, you fell under the category of Rule number 25. And you could not fight for a title. So Mickey Walker would then face Tommy Milligan. He would knock out Tommy Milligan 4 rounds, leaving Len Johnson left standing alone. Len Johnson would eventually become a champion. He had to go to Australia to win that title. It would be the British Empire middleweight championship belt, but not recognized in England, only recognized in Australia because of that rule. And Lynn Johnson would fight to get on the board because he wanted to straighten out that law, and they would never allow him to get on the board. So he demonstrated with a couple of friends, black and white. We'd go into a bar and they would not pay for the drink. He would be arrested. But eventually he would get on the board and he would change the laws. And had it not been for Lynn Johnson, fighters such as Anthony Joshua, Nigel Bent, Frank Bruno, many others would not be allowed to fight for a championship belt. Shout out to Lynn Johnson. He must be on the list. And by the way, Lynn Johnson would take on Ben Harvey, Roland Todd, Ted Kid Lewis, and many others, and he would beat them all. But never get a title shot with Mickey Walker. You see, Mickey Walker would relinquish the middleweight championship crown, 31. They would develop a tournament because you had another young man by the name of Harry Smith, the Harlem Thunderbolt. Yeah, William Gorilla Jones. They were the top 5, along with Lynn Johnson. So Mickey Walker decided, since pressure was being played on him, he moved up to the light heavyweight division, and they would develop a tournament. He had another fighter by the name of Jack Chase, called him Young Joe Louis. Isaiah James Chase was born January 27, 1914 in Sherman, Texas. He died March 23, 1972. He was 58 years of age at the time of his death. He began boxing of St. Mary's Auditorium. It was in Colorado against Billy Pryor on January 30th, 1936.